Look, it goes without saying that Asus makes a ton of flashy products, and while some of these are absolute technological wonders, they also make some pretty down-to-earth stuff, and the Vivobook is a prime example. I'm talking about the Vivobook, not the S variant, not the Pro variant, but the bottom of the line one. And we've got the latest generation of this product with us today, specifically the Vivobook 16. So it is rocking the brand new Snapdragon X entry-level processor. We've also got the Adreno GPU baked into that same chip. Furthermore, we get 16GB of LPDDR5X memory, a nice large 1TB SSD, Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3 standards, and this is a 16-inch IPS display. Now the Vivobook is ultimately a mid-range laptop or a budget laptop depending on which region you're viewing it in, but we'll try to keep it at that bar and see if this is a good device if you're looking for an entry-level experience with a general productivity machine. So let's get into it. Since this is a non-retail unit, I'm going to skip the packaging experience. What I will tell you, aside from the Vivobook 16 itself, you also get a 65-watt charging adapter with a Type-C front. The Vivobook 16 is a very well put together device. Despite having a full plastic build from top to bottom, it feels sturdy and it feels durable. I will say that it is missing the modern day sleek element. It is somewhat chunky looking, and as a result, it might not look like the most appealing device aesthetically speaking. Nonetheless, though, one of its biggest benefits is the fact that despite having a 16-inch form factor, it only has an overall weight of 4.18 pounds, making it one of the lighter 16-inch laptops you can buy in the general productivity department. Now, starting with the top side, like I mentioned, you have a plastic surface. Over here, you can see it's that silver color. Depending on where you are, it might also be available in a blue variant, and it seems to be fairly resistant to fingerprints, which is always a good thing. We get some pretty sweet I/O port selection overall. So on one side, we've got a USB 4.0 port with power delivery and DisplayPort functionality. We also do get a USB-A super speed port, a HDMI 2.1 port, furthermore, one more USB 4 Type-C port with power delivery and DisplayPort functionality like the previous one, and the good old headphone jack. On the other side, we get one more USB-A port. Overall, I/O port selection here is pretty healthy, and I don't really have anything to nitpick on. You've got a pretty straightforward plastic container for the bottom lid over here. You will notice you do have cutouts for the air intake vent right here on the top corner, and you'll also notice that you actually have the heat exhaust vent at the very tip over here, which is really smart placement on Asus's end. And then you'll also notice you have two more speaker grill cutouts on either corner, so this is a bottom firing speaker setup. As you might have expected, when you unfold this device, you've got a generous amount of palm rest space, which is the theme with most 16-inch laptops. Now, you'll also appreciate that the inner chassis has the same color consistency with that silver color over here, despite being a plastic chassis. At the center, you do have this nice large trackpad. Again, a plastic surface finish, which is totally in line with this class. However, what I appreciate is that there isn't a lot of flex here, and it's actually relatively tactile, making for a pretty decent trackpad experience. Asus has done a great job executing the keyboard here, so you'll notice that the keycaps have a black finishing, the font is pretty easy to read, and you have plenty of surface area per keycap. However, what you really appreciate is just how bright the backlit system gets over here, which makes it truly effective. You also have the inclusion of a 10 key pad, and one of the best parts is just the fact that you have these elevated keycaps, which results in a lot of key travel and a truly tactile typing experience, making this one of the better experiences you'll have on a mid-range laptop when it comes to general typing. What I'm not a fan of is the two-tier hinge mechanism. Despite giving you a 180-degree tilt, which is impressive, it exerts a ton of force on the main body, which can have potential long-term wear and tear implications. Now, as far as display fitting is concerned, you have a medium-sized chin at the bottom with a plastic encasing. It's not too noticeable and within acceptable margins. At the sides, you'll notice you have nice narrow bezels, providing for an immersive view, and again, at the center, a medium-sized forehead, not too shabby, at the center of which you have a full HD IR equipped webcam, which has decent image quality. Unfortunately, the display wasn't the biggest priority with this laptop, and you can tell because Asus stuck to the bare bone basic specifications. So you get a full HD plus resolution display here with a IPS panel. Thankfully, you do get a 16:10 aspect ratio. However, it is worth noting you only have a refresh rate of just 60 Hz, which is a bit of a bummer. Now, you'll also notice you have a 300 nits peak brightness, which is sufficient when combined with with the anti-glare coating for most indoor settings. As far as the color rating is concerned, again, a very base 45% NTSC rating or approximately 56% sRGB, which means this laptop isn't going to be adequate for most color sensitive activities and provides a pretty basic viewing experience. A quick rundown of the technical specifications. So depending on where you are, they will vary, but the one we have here includes Qualcomm Snapdragon X 128-100 CPU. It also has the Adreno GPU baked into that same chipset. Furthermore, we do have 16GB of LPDDR5X memory. In terms of general performance, whether surfing the web or typing up Word documents, this laptop does a fantastic job and is very easygoing. You can even do some power productivity activities like program and code compilation, and based on our test, it was a very optimized experience thanks to an ample amount of system memory and horsepower. When trying to really push this laptop with 3D level animation activities, especially on a non-ARM native application like Blender, you are going to have some pretty tough luck. There's going to be a lot of frame drops, and it's not really what I'd consider a viable experience. However, one of my concerns is that even when you are running ARM optimized programs like DaVinci Resolve, the performance still isn't quite there when compared to comparable Intel and AMD devices, where you still get a fair bit of frame drops even with full HD video editing and just no more than 2 or 3 layers. Now, this is not to say it's a bad experience, and I do honestly believe with optimization over time, this process will catch up to the likes of what AMD and Intel have to put out, but we still do notice that visible lag when compared to those specifications. And also, I want to mention that casual gaming is entirely possible as long as you can find a game that is compatible with the ARM variant. So for example, Ashpod Legends over here was consistently hitting close to 60 frames per second and providing for a very smooth and fluid experience. Efficiency is the name of the game, and Vivo and Qualcomm truly recognize that. Under unrealistic peak loads, the thermals barely hit 32 degrees Celsius with the average surface temperature, but a more realistic sustainable would yield you just around 28 degrees Celsius, making this an exceptionally cool device. Fan noise equally as impressive. Despite having a single fan setup, we found that the fan noise barely peaked at around 33 decibels, and that was in small frequencies by itself. Overall, the thermals on this device are one of the best reviewed in 2025 and probably in a long time, to be honest. Self-upgradability options are going to be fairly limited, but the good news is that you can upgrade the one preoccupied M.2 slot with another 2280 drive of a higher capacity. While we do get a relatively small 50 watt-hour battery, don't let that number deceive you because Qualcomm's efficiency always makes up for it. We got a realistic 14 hours runtime on a general productivity use case, which is very impressive, and official benchmark numbers will yield even higher results. Now, as far as the speaker quality is concerned, you've got a 2-speaker system here, bottom firing. It's not going to sound particularly great, but it does an adequate job for a device like this. Here's a quick sound test for reference. Always do it on my own, so I gotta get through it. And the only thing I know is to love what I'm doing. Never give up, never slow, till I finally prove it. Never listen to the no's, I just wanna keep moving. Keep my head up when I act, head up, that's a fact. With a retail price of $750 for the Vivobook 16 Qualcomm configuration that we have here, the fact is this is ultimately a mid-range device, and in that aspect it succeeds in a lot of ways. I mean, you've got a sturdy build, you've also got lots of I/O port selection, which is up to modern day standards. I also appreciate the fact of just how comfortable the trackpad and keyboard are, despite the limitations we often find in this class category. And yes, overall the device does have that utilitarian look going for it. Now, it's worth noting that some things could have been better. For example, having a higher refresh rate than 60Hz was definitely a possibility that Asus could have considered over here. But the real thing you'll want to consider is whether you want to get the Qualcomm version or the AMD or Intel variant. So if you're looking for fantastic efficiency that's unrivaled for light use productivity, then the Qualcomm variant is the way to go with the Snapdragon X chip that we reviewed here. However, if you want more horsepower and versatility, the fact that the Intel and AMD chips still do have a noticeable lead and will give you a more effective workflow with the Vivobook 16 if it's available in your region. So keep that consideration in mind when you decide which variant of the Vivobook to get. The good news is that Asus gives us a ton of flexibility here, allowing us to decide which configuration might be right for us ultimately. Let me know what you think of the Vivobook 16. If you already have it, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You will find links below to purchase it in various regions. Catch you in the next one.